yes, the classic Space Marine, the Giga Chad of every young nerd's dreams, and the golden child of the Warhammer 40k franchise. We spend massive amounts of time and money buying boxes and boxes of these miniatures to populate our beloved armies, and if you're a fan of the more vintage persuasion, then you probably stay up all night on eBay bidding your hard-earned cash on a job lot of around 4 to 5 of these dudes, which are probably caked in various paints, glues, and probably human bits which have accumulated over time. Which is why every single one of these sturdy warriors of the far future are precious and...
Hang on. Wait, no, wait, what? Hi everyone, I'm Louise, and this is Rogue Hobbies, and today I'm gonna let you in on the secret to having infinity Space Marines using just this little box here. Whoosh, whoosh. I can't remember which way it is. We're going this way. Whoosh. Hey guys, it's Future Editing Louise here, interrupting for 2 seconds because I've got some fun news. Your favourite little rascal RH001 has just gone back up on sale, and we've designed him with extra sturdy materials and we've put him in a fancy new box, and this one comes with a free painting tutorial too, which I think is pretty cool. The first wave of these goblins sold out in just 15 minutes, and this wave is going quite quickly as well, so if you're eager to take one of these little guys home for yourself, then you can head on over to roguehobbies.com now and pick one up. And that's it, I just wanted to let you know that the goblin is back up for sale. So back to the video, bye! So what is this little box here? Well, it all started when I was on one of my bi-monthly quests to try and understand how Reddit works, and I scrolled past this GIF. And I was instantly hooked at how unfathomably easy and good the end result looked. And by good, I mean the end result looked like 2nd edition Space Marines, so make of that what you will. I just think they're neat. All that you seem to need to make these little Space Marines are the following things. A 3D printer or a friend with a 3D printer so that you can print the little thingy. The file for the 3D print, which you can get from this designer here, and I will pop a link in the notes if you want to find them there. And some play-doh to make the little Space Marine himself. So it's pretty simple, right? Well, so it would seem. So what? I just get to squeeze out? That sounds really weird. Squeezing out Space Marines, like squeeze them out. I just get to squeeze out as many cool looking 2nd edition Space Marines using just this little gadget. That seems like such a cool and original and novel idea, and I just love it so much. But upon further research on this kind of concept, I realized that the whole idea for it comes from this really awesome and cool looking board game called Necromolds. This game looks so cool, and whilst I've not played it yet, the whole concept looks awesome. You can use these neat little individualized molds to build, play, and return your little pool of fighty monsters back to their horrific Play-Doh conglomerate from whence they came. The website itself says the game was made with miniature wargamers in mind, and even has this neat little picture of a monster being painted up with some G-dubs paints in the background. And that got me thinking, like, can I just have infinite Space Marines? Like, come on, like, surely not. Is this little box the key to unlocking? Jesus, I really do sound like a YouTuber now. Like, hey guys, it's Louise Sugden with Rogue Hobbies here, and today we are going to unlock the secret of Games Workshop Hater. But yeah, what I'm really interested in finding out, and I bet what you guys want to know too, is if we can use that little gadget to not just make Play-Doh Space Marines, but make hard and durable miniatures which look good and that we can prime and paint and base and then use in our wargaming like we do with Games Workshop miniatures. Well, to find out, we're gonna have to print out the component first, so let's start with that. It comes in 4 big sturdy parts, a front piece, a back piece, and 2 2 little studs for the hinges, and the whole thing clicks together really well and is really satisfying and durable and sturdy feeling when it's done. If you're planning on printing out this little device yourself, then the only thing I'd advise you to be careful of at this point is removing all the little supports on the inside of the mold area. Any little scratches or bumps or indentations here will end up altering the look of your Space Marine when you press it together later, so make sure you just take your time here. I also really like the fact that they sculpted the outside of the box to have this little decorative logo on it. It just makes the box look so much cooler when it's done. It feels like a little in-world trinket box or something like that. I just think it's really cute, so well done. So now that we have our little Space Marine making thing, it's time to have some fun.
Hey you! Have you ever had this problem with your Warhammer the 40,000 space machines?
She took the kids.
Well, no more tears, because it's Play-doh Space Marines! They're stretchy. They're squishy. They're politically dubious. You can pull them apart and destroy them again and again and again and again and again, then rebuild them in all their former glory. Unlike your broken marriage. Go to war with your army of thousands against your friends. Or just don't and stay inside where everything feels safe and no one can hurt you. Play-doh Space Marines! Get them now before they leave you too!
Well, it turns out for a bit of fun, this thing here absolutely slaps. The Play-Doh worked out really well, and I was honestly just having the best time ever. And of course, I got way too into it and ended up making an entire army of weirdly colored Space Marines from various colors of Play-Doh. I even played around with doing multicolored tie-dye ones, which looks so cool and really inspired me to make the tie-dye Rainbow Warrior video that I've always wanted to do. Making around 30 Play-Doh Space Marines gave me loads of practice, but also a better understanding as to how the mold sort of works, which is going to be really important later on when I try to make a Space Marine which is durable and paintable. I found that in my quest to make the perfect paintable Space Marine using this mold, that there were a few issues. Firstly, you have to put just the right amount of dough in the mold. Too little and the detail doesn't come out properly in certain areas. Stuffing the mold face first with dough so that all the details on the front come out properly, and then packing the rest of the mold, seemingly with too much dough, and then squeezing super hard seemed to help a lot with this. Secondly, if you did end up getting a good press in your mold when you opened it up, getting the Marine out of the mold after that wasn't exactly easy. To get your Marine out of the mold, you essentially have to pull on an area in order to remove him, and of course Play-Doh is soft, and if you pull it, it just kind of stretches. After a lot of trial and error, I found that the best way is to get a cocktail stick or just kind of pull really gently on the back of the base in an area I didn't really mind looking a little bit wonky to release half of the Marine, then feverishly shake the rest of the Space Marine out of the mold. This resulted in a few wonky Space Marines who have a bit of a lean, but the trade-off is that the detail is well preserved and crisp on the front of the miniature. But obviously, we're going to be pushing this project a little bit further to find out if we can make a sturdy army of Space Marines out of something a little bit more durable than Play-Doh. And to find out if we can, we're going to have to dip into some more of my hobby supplies. The first and maybe the most obvious thing for me to try was to make a Space Marine with the classic green stuff, and I did try, and oh boy. From what I'd learned from the Play-Doh phase, I knew I'd probably have to mix a lot of green stuff in order to make this work. So I did, and it took forever, and my hands really hurt, and I thought that green stuff would be the perfect material for this project, but unfortunately, this time it really just wasn't. I used a little bit of water and washing up liquid to act as a release fluid on the mold, and I loaded it up with the green stuff, but it was just too solid. My tiny hands couldn't squeeze the mold together enough to make a good cast. And then when I opened it up, it just hadn't pushed into the gaps enough, and the green stuff was too solid and it had lots of lumps in it, and it just wasn't it. I think that if I had some fresher, newer green stuff, or maybe used a softer mix and a clamp, it would have maybe worked a little bit better, but this time it didn't, so I just decided to move on. Oh, but I did decide to turn the failed lumps of green stuff into cool Space Marine kind of carbonite sort of things, which I may use in the future for gaming tokens or cosplay or something like that, so not all is lost. After I had failed miserably to make a Space Marine out of a very solid material, I decided to go the complete opposite direction and try and make one out of something very, very soft. Clouds. A cloud Space Marine. No, it's not a cloud. I wish it was. I cracked into some Das clay, which is a very wet, soft clay mix, and since it was already wet, I didn't want to use any watery release fluid as it may soften some of the details on the marine. So I just shoved a big lump of the stuff into the mold and squeezed really hard, and it was delightfully easy. And upon opening the mold, it seemed like it had taken the detail really well too. The problem here was taking the miniature out of the box. Due to its softness and moistness, it was pretty tough to take it out in one piece or in a way which actually preserved all of the details. And this material was one of the worst ones for giving the Marines the extreme lean which a lot of them ended up having from pulling them backwards out of the box. But eventually, after a few tries, I managed to get a few which I really liked. Now, one material that I was really excited to use because I had very high hopes for the outcome was a material called Supersculpy. Supersculpy is this almost polymer clay-like material, and the stuff that I use looks a little bit like human skin, which is kind of cool, and it's firm, but not too firm, and it's not at all chalky like the clay material, so I was really excited to see how this turned out. Unfortunately, sort of like the green stuff, I found it quite tough to squeeze together. Not as tough, but still hard to get that perfect press. But I knew this material was usable, so I ventured downstairs to bug Curtis from Ramshackle Miniatures for the use of his big clamp. And this seemed to be the secret sauce to making the perfect Space Marines. The clamp squeezed the miniature together perfectly and made a bunch of fun little bubbles too, which were cute to look at. And due to the Supersculpy not being too soft, the miniatures came out pretty easily too. It was hard to see the details because of the sort of semi-translucent waxy looking nature of the clay, but I had a really good feeling about this one. The final material that I wanted to try out is something called Fimo, which I remembered fondly from my art school days. Fimo is a type of polymer clay which usually comes in a bunch of fun colours, and is often used for things like jewellery and bead making. I thought Fimo would be perfect, having just tried the Supersculpy, and I was excited to see if I could make some more robust looking tie-dye Space Marines like I had with the play-doh. So I stole Curtis's clamp, and I nearly broke my kneecap when it fell off my desk. And unfortunately, to my great surprise, it was the worst one yet. I'm not sure why, but the Fimo just kind of crumbled and got stuck inside of the mold, and no matter how much or how little or how not at all release fluid I used, it just didn't seem to work out. So I ended up making some pretty swirly opal looking beads from the leftovers, and I cut my losses here too. Oh yeah, bonus round, woo! I ended up making a Space Marine candle out of the Space Marine candle, which actually went surprisingly really well, and I think that maybe this weird greasy wax may be secretly the best material to use in this mold, which is really weird and I hate it. It doesn't smell like Faith though, it smells very specifically like your grandmother's avocado and beige coloured bathroom from the 80s, which I guess is now the canonical smell for Dark Angels, so make of that what you will. It melted up real good though, and it was really fun to watch, so nice. So now that I have a whole load of Space Marines made out of different materials, it's time to let them all harden up and dry and see which ones, if any, turned out the best. Let's take a look at the results, starting with the worst, Fimo. I kind of don't know what went wrong here. I really expected it to work, and I think as with all of the materials, which maybe didn't go as well in this video, if I was given enough time, I do think that I could make it work, but maybe that's like my toxic trait, like, ugh, I can change him. But in this instance, Fimo didn't seem to want to play ball at all, so I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10 because the bead looked pretty. Next up, we have green stuff, and I think that even if I decided to use the big clamp to squeeze it all together, I still just don't think it would have been quite right for the project. If I was to do this again, I would end up using the big clamp, but I'd also use a softer mix and maybe fresher and newer green stuff. But at least we can kind of see a Space Marine here, so I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. In third place, we have Das Clay, because it's okay. You can see that when it dried, I had to do a little bit of cleaning up around the edges, which is fine, and given the softness of the clay, it was also super easy to do when it was dry, which was really nice. Still, I really like these pieces when they were done and dry. They feel really sturdy and satisfying, and I think if your kids were interested in painting up some Space Marines, this would be a really good way to introduce them to that without them having to paint up a real Space Marine, and I think that's pretty cool, so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. And to my great surprise, in second place, we have the play-doh. I was pretty shocked by this, but when I ended up giving the play-doh Space Marines around 3 to 4 days to fully dry up, they ended up being quite solid and firm. Unfortunately, there were some instances of cracking in the dough, which occurred on pretty much every Space Marine in various different extremities, but that was easily fixable with just a little bit of super glue. Another thing that I had to do was to make around 20 of these Space Marines to find 3 to 4 which actually looked good, as in their details were all there, they weren't too smushy or cracky or leany, and honestly, since it didn't take me that long to make around 20, this didn't seem like too much of a problem at all. And maybe the funnest thing about the Play-Doh Marines in general is that when the Play-Doh dried, it shrank, like a lot, which meant that I now had some adorable looking firstborn size Marines, which are actually way closer in size to the original 2nd edition Space Marines that they're based on. So again, surprisingly, I'm going to be giving the Play-Doh Space Marines a very flattering 7 out of 10. And finally, and maybe not surprisingly, in first place, we have the Supersculpy Space Marines. Supersculpy Space Marines, that's fun to say. I had to let them dry next to a space heater instead of an oven because I don't have an oven at my studio, and I do not recommend this, do not do this, it's stupid, I'm dumb. But when they were dry, they were definitely the best. They kept their details best of all the sculpts, they were stood up the straightest, they had the least amount of imperfections, and they were the most firm and like plasticky feeling out of all of the sculpts as well. I was really pleased with the results, and as with all of them, I feel like if I had a few more days to practice, I could get some looking 10 out of 10, but I was really happy with the 3 to 4 that I had, and I am giving them a very solid 8.5 out of 10. So I picked out the best Space Marine of the lot, which was this one here, made out of Supersculpy, which had the least amount of imperfections on him. And I decided it was finally time to try and paint one of these little guys up. And going in, my hopes weren't super high for the outcome. I was just gonna have a little bit of fun and see where it ended up. But honestly, the results were super surprising. I cleaned up the Space Marine as best I could using a craft knife to remove all the little imperfections and mold lines and get him looking as good and clean as possible. And after he was primed and I got into it, there were a few minutes where I was like, oh no, this is going wrong. But after the base coats were on and I kind of got into my painting groove, I forgot that what I was painting was essentially a mushed up bit of clay, and I started to just feel like I was painting a Space Marine again. Sure, his face is a little goofy looking and his backpack is a little bit flat, but it was fun and I found myself genuinely concentrating on painting up a dope and colourful old school Imperial fist and not focusing on hiding mistakes or anything like that. And after a few hours of painting when he was done, I think he actually looked pretty damn cool. Like genuinely one of the better Space Marines I think I've ever painted, which if you think about it, is really dumb. But as usual, I wasn't quite satisfied, and I couldn't just stop the project here because I felt like I had kind of completed it on easy mode. I felt like if I was really gonna prove that with this little box and some Play-Doh, you could have a full infinite Space Marine army at home, I had to bite the bullet and actually paint one made of Play-Doh. Again, I picked the best looking one out of the bunch, and I did my best to fix him up and remove as many mold lines and weird bits and make him look as normal as I could. After I'd sprayed him, I was a little concerned with my life choices, as there was a bit of a weird bumpy texture on the miniature, which I think came from the shrinkage and the fact that he is literally made out of Play-Doh. What am I doing? Oh my god. But I persevered, accepting the fact that this may not be my best paint job and it may look awful, but hey, at least we had fun along the way, right? Until it actually started looking good again. After a few layers of paint, the weird texture went away, and by the time I'd finished all of the blue armor, I felt once again like I was just painting up a normal Space Marine. The Play-Doh was tough, and the details were deep and clear enough, and I was having a great time. Of course, in order to push myself into true difficult mode, I had to make this miniature as detailed as I could, so I went with my classic paint scheme for Rainbow Warriors. And if you're interested in how I painted this guy and also this guy here, then there is a whole video for that up on my Patreon, which you can sign up to and watch now. And also if you're interested in Rainbow Warriors in general, then I made a fun YouTube video about Rainbow Warriors and how much I love them, and I'll link that here too. Okay, bye. And this color scheme meant that I could add in loads of tiny freehanding and cool color effects and chipping and weathering details too. And once again, I am genuinely shocked by the end results. I have two sturdy and cool looking Space Marine miniatures which were fun and easy to paint, and I think they look great and really have that 90s plastic Space Marine charm as well. And maybe most importantly, I also now have the ability to just keep going. And I know they're not perfect and they're a little goofy looking, but isn't it super cool that as long as I have this little box and some Play-Doh, which literally cost me about £5, then I can keep producing and painting miniatures which are sturdy and durable and that I'm really happy with and I can play games with forever and ever. Until I need a jump pack unit or a dreadnought, then I guess it's back to the drawing board. As usual, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!